Hey there, you guys. It's lovely to see you, and I hope that you are keeping well wherever you are amid the madness that is out there. Thank you for joining me once again at the bottom of the garden with the robins and the shovels. I lie. There are no shovels in this shed. It's not a shovelly kind of shed, you know. But there's the garden gnomes too down here, although I can tell you that they're all fast asleep, early risers gnomes, don't you know? But look, you are very welcome to the holy shed, and if you're here for the first time, no worries, you will soon find yourself perfectly at home, because I am personally yet to meet an unfriendly soul in here. And if you like it, of course, you can bring all your pals along next time, because there's plenty of room. And it's Lent, isn't it? It's Lent in the shed now. And I'm looking forward to these next 6 weeks. 6 weeks? I know, Lent's a long time, isn't it? I'm looking forward to these 6 weeks, not least because by the time we've finished, the world we expect will be looking quite a lot different. Hopefully here in the UK we'll be a bit less locked down and a load more people will be jabbed, which is very, very good news. And best of all, it will be Easter. It will be full on spring. Hurrah! And look at these guys. These are some spring characters, aren't they? And they've sprung up. Do you know, for, I think, about several days, because I think I showed you these guys last week, didn't I? All closed up, and they've been standing there all shut up like, you know, no one's at home. We're cozy in our beds for days, because it has been peeing down and peeing down. It's been grey and windy and blustery and horrible. And then, within 5 minutes of the sun coming out, boom, there they were. All of a sudden, I looked out this morning just as the sun came out and saw all these smiling faces gawping up to heaven. Total sun worshippers they are, crocuses. And another thing, you know, is that in 3 weeks' time, the Holy Shed will celebrate its first birthday. Isn't that great? So what do you reckon we should do for that? Cake, I reckon. Always have cake for a birthday. But what else? Any other ideas of what we can do for the first birthday of the Holy Shed? Mind you, I have already had some presents sent, not for the birthday of the shed, of course, but for me. I mean, I had this lovely bottle of whiskey sent to me. I know it's a bit scary, isn't it? A bit demonic. I love it. It's called Smokehead. I've never seen this before, from Isla, which is great. And also, that was sent by our friends Andy and Mel, who hosted me to give a talk at the Leeds Sunday Assembly almost 6 years ago now. And they sent that along with this beautiful card. Don't you love a kingfisher? Well, watch this. Bing! Isn't that great? There he goes. Bing! I love it. And also, when I went to the Leeds Sunday Assembly all those years ago, it made me remember that I was presented with this here, which I know, it's unnerving, isn't it? The likeness is unnerving. I looked at this guy and it was like looking in a mirror. Made for me by Mrs. Twist, I think her name is, a balloon twister. And I'd forgotten all about that picture until I got the presents this week. So we're going to have a few extra features in the shed for Lent. Every week I am going to be doing a midweek Holy Shedlet. Don't know if you've seen the one that I did last Wednesday for Ash Wednesday. You can find that, and I'll post them all actually on my YouTube channel, which you will find very easily on YouTube, of course. But I'll post the link also on the Holy Shed Facebook as well. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, by the way, you know, you get notifications when new things are up there. And if you like the Holy Shed, do a like on Facebook too, because it's always good. It gets the word out more and more. Poems will be a feature during Lent. Of course they will. Like, you know, I'm a poet freak. And I'll also be sharing some images and icons of some subversive saints, some of God's black sheep who inspire me. And there'll be lots of other things too as we go through these next 6 weeks. And in the main slot of the Holy Shed, I'll be looking at some key areas of faith. Lent I don't know if you know, but Lent is a very ancient practice created as a fast in preparation for Easter, especially for those who were being baptized on the eve of Easter, which is when the early church traditionally baptized their converts. Originally, Lent lasted just a few days, but somebody had the bright idea of expanding it to 40 days in the 4th century. 40 days, of course, being the period that Jesus was in the wilderness, being tempted and fasting. At St. Luke's, my last parish, I always used Lent as an opportunity to revisit the meaning of faith, to create a space where we could chew over our doubts and questions. So that's what we'll be doing in the shed this year. We'll include things that, of course, we've raised before over this past year, but I guess that's no problem really. And look, we can't all be together, obviously, in the flesh, where we could interact more directly. But I would like to encourage you to post your questions on Facebook or send them to me through Messenger or email me at davetomlinson@mac.com, davetomlinson@mac.com. And we'll do the best we can to include whatever questions that you raise. Now, I also encouraged you last week to post or message any requests that you had for inclusion in our candle moment, prayer requests if you like to use old money. So I have a few names to mention, but please keep on sending in or posting names of people that you are reaching out to at this time, wishing better things for. So we're going to light the candle, and you may have other names, of course, that are not going to be mentioned by me. But let's bring these and all the people that we love and we are concerned for at this time. So there's lovely Margaret, a woman that I know back up in North London. I took a blessing, a renewal of the vows of her and her husband Brian after 30 years of marriage a few years back. And Brian suddenly died just recently, which is very, very sad. So I'm thinking of Margaret and her children and her grandchildren. Shirley asked us if we would pray for her husband Bob, who's going through some immunotherapy for cancer. And then there was a request from Makey in the Netherlands, who says, would you please pray for my brother Arnold and his family? Alan asked if we could include Chris, his friend Chris, who is in the middle of treatment for leukemia, getting chemo before hopefully then going on to get a bone marrow transplant. Val has asked us to pray and to remember her daughter Suze, who lives in New Zealand, who fell from a climbing frame whilst holding her daughter Layla, who's just 3. And Suze is now in hospital awaiting surgery. She's damaged 2 vertebrae. And then there's Andrew asked us to remember Vince and his dad Jim. Let there be healing and love return to them both, Andrew says. So we bring these people and all those others that you are naming where you are right now. And if you have a candle, please do light it. For all our loved ones and for ourselves, we pray, God grant me the serenity to live fully and generously through circumstances I cannot control. Hope to keep on imagining better times for myself and the world, and courage to change what I can instead of simply leaving it to others. Amen. And of course, if you have people that you'd like to include in this candle moment, then do message me, post them, whatever. And if there's too many, then I'll just simply put the names on the screen, but do send them in. Now, I guess that you've heard of John Robinson, the famous Bishop of Woolwich in the 1960s, who wrote the controversial book Honest to God, which it's only a little thing, but they say the poison comes in small bottles. And this amazing little book was scandalized really by traditionalist Christians who saw it as an assault on the basic tenets of their faith. And the truth is, John Robinson was simply reflecting in this book the radical shifts in theology that have been taking place throughout the 20th century through people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Paul Tillich, Rudolf Bultmann and others. But he took these sort of writings of these people, these thoughts and ideas, and synthesized them and popularized the issues. And back there in the 1960s, it made headline news in the national press. And he was, as I say, both at the same time loved by people who are looking for a more open, generous, progressive faith, and despised by those who felt that he was really vandalizing the Christian tradition. And a couple of years later, Bishop Robinson released another book entitled But That I Can't Believe, in which he more systematically critiqued creedal faith, attempting to make it intelligible to the modern world. And here's the thing, despite the negative sounding title of the book, But That I Can't Believe, it was actually a statement of what he could and what he did believe. And it rang bells with an awful lot of people inside and outside of the church. And in my own humble way, I try to follow a similar path. My passion is to make faith comprehensible and credible to the 21st century mind. I'm not really bothered if some conservative people think that I've lost the plot. These are not the people I'm writing for or speaking to. I'm more interested in trying to help people on the edges of faith to make sense of who Jesus Christ is and can be for us today. And it's the response that I get from these people that energizes me to keep going, to press on. And I can tell you this, by far my favourite message came some years back now from a university professor who wrote this. He said, and I'm reading this off my screen here now, he says, "A year ago I was in a state of rage bordering on church burning. I felt like Winston having escaped from Big Brother or the Savage in Brave New World and wanted revenge for all those mind-fucking sermons, miserable guilt-worm feelings and the ludicrous newspeak that had been my life for 20 years. There was no church I could go into," he says, "without having a severe reaction and either walking out or putting my fingers in my ears and going, la, 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 la," which he said my wife found embarrassing and looked like demonization to those who are so wise about these things. A copy of your book, I can just hear the cavalry coming over the hill, a copy of your book and a visit to the Greenbelt Festival were the first indications that I was not entirely alone. I am now completely free from that stifling kind of religion that slowly strangles the life out of you, and from the susceptibility to completely flee reality. My spirituality is now my own, not an undigested mixture introjected from 1,000 grim sermons and silly books. I can get in touch with the strength of it deep inside. I can read the words of Jesus, but their meaning is now changed like rain into snowflakes. My mind is now open and not tight shut, and I feel an almost primitive sense of freedom and energy. I mean, wow! I think if he wrote a book, or was it she actually, I think if she wrote a book, I would definitely buy it. And after decades of spurning the term evangelist, do you know what? I now comfortably see myself as a kind of evangelist, an evangelist for progressive faith, because I believe the world needs a generous-spirited, progressively minded faith which is proclaimed with all the zeal and passion of an evangelist, someone who reckons they've got some good news to announce. It seems a shame to me that very often, more liberal faith tends to be expressed in very cerebral kind of terms that are never going to really engage with ordinary people. It can be very intellectual. I think that we need something that's more on that level of the evangelical in this sense. And my book, Black Sheep and Prodigals, is of course my most recent attempt to summarise as much as possible in non-religious language the faith that I can and that I do believe in with all my heart. It's still very much a work in progress because, you know what, that's how I reckon faith should always be. I don't ever want to reach the end of it, not here in this world anyway. That said, that book does represent decades of serious thinking and researching and rethinking and changing my mind and shifting here and there. It comes out of a process of a lot of hard work, really. And, I had two criteria in my mind when I wrote that book. I wanted to set out a Christian faith which is A, consonant with and informed by a contemporary scientific outlook, and B, which was representative of a humane, generous and progressive approach to living together as a planetary community, because I think that is so much what we need these days. Not little tribalisms, but a recognition that we are a planetary community. We may all have our different faiths and our different cultures and all the rest. That's all beautiful and wonderful. But we need to always keep solidly in our hearts and minds the fact that we are one people on earth, and we're part of a whole diverse, beautiful, multi-creature community. And it's my work in progress, Black Sheep and Prodigals. It's my work in progress credo, my way of saying, but this I can believe. So what I intend to do through Lent is to discuss some of the main points that I've raised in that book, and also to fill in some gaps that I didn't cover, and to say how I got there from where I was. I'm not asking anyone to believe the whole thing, to accept exactly what I believe. I often say, please don't, feel you have to believe everything that I believe, because, I've changed my mind and I will do it again. But this, where I am right now, this is my credo. But I'm inviting you, dear Shedsters, to go on a similar journey, to use Lent as an opportunity to think about what you can and can't believe. The title of the book is a nod to the many people who've inspired my continued faith adventure, who I see as these subversive saints, if you like, black sheep, people who are prepared to wander from convention and orthodoxy, not simply for the sake of wandering, but because they value honesty and integrity more than just keeping a party line. And that spirit of honest inquiry and reflection turned into a way of life is summed up in what I call black sheep spirituality, which is what I'm really addressing tonight. Black sheep spirituality. That's what I'm zealous to nurture and to promote. I think, that there is a black sheep in every single one of us, actually even in the most conservative of us. And I think getting in touch with that inner black sheep is utterly vital and essential to an authentic faith journey. It's worth pointing out that conformity is not a fruit of the Spirit, not when I last looked anyway. And Jesus himself never looked much like a conformist, did he? Which is why he ended up, of course, where he did. Institutions in general, and perhaps religious institutions in particular, do not tend to like nonconformists. That said, Jesus never spurned tradition as such. He was a reformer, a reviser, an evolver of tradition, but he didn't ditch, trash or vandalize the Jewish faith. He really stood in the tradition of the prophets, whose calling was to renew Judaism's heart and core instincts, and that's what I can see Jesus doing throughout the Gospels. To me, tradition isn't simply a thing like a bundle of ideas, beliefs and rituals to be conserved, preserved and handed down unchanged from generation to generation. Tradition isn't a set of untouched truths and principles to be repeated parrot fashion ad nauseum. No, I see tradition more like a huge, wonderful, evolving story looking for the next chapter. Tradition as an evolving story looking for the next chapter, or like a huge discussion or debate, an outright argument at times, where many views are brought in and are part of that conversation. I think tradition is like a culture that never loses touch with its history or its originating instincts, but is never bound by them. But when a tradition ossifies or fossilizes, it just becomes an empty shell, devoid of the spirit that first gave it breath. In order to stay alive, tradition needs to, bubble and gurgle and evolve, constantly evolve, adapting to new ideas, new insights, new situations, new challenges. And ironically, to be true to its roots, tradition has to mutate. It has to be transfigured. Or, as my good friend Maggie Dawn rather cutely put it, you have to change to stay the same. Isn't that good? You have to change to stay the same. In other words, to be true or faithful to the originating spirit of our faith, we have to move on. And I think that is, a crucial element of what really tradition is all about. The problem is, institutions have a sociological impulse to fossilize. It's like something that's kind of built in, like a design fault. It's got this impulse to guard their precious orthodoxies against corruption or impurities. So they spawn cultures of conformity. This is how we do things. This is what we believe. And you know what? Fear is the glue that holds those cultures of conformity together. There's always that kind of threat, spoken or implied. If you do that, if you believe that, if you go down that road, ... But conformity is not the same thing as community. Conformity derides the innovative and the novel. It can't stand it. It discourages curiosity. Don't even go there. But real community, diverse community, creates a safe space where the innovative and the novel can thrive, where curiosity isn't just tolerated but fostered. Which is why I believe that we need church communities which are what I call laboratories of the Spirit. It's a phrase that comes actually from R.S. Thomas in a slightly different poet, in a slightly different context. But I believe in laboratories of the Spirit, places where we can explore issues of faith and spirituality with openness, with imagination and creativity. I think that we need churches to be hotbeds of passionate diversity, schools of independent thinking and believing, spirited locations of debate and difference, where multiple integrities can coexist in friendship, in love and respect. Is that what we find in churches? Not very often, I'm afraid, but that's what I feel committed to. And it may happen in buildings with spikes on top. I hope it can, and it does. But if not, then it needs to happen wherever people will gather to honestly search and explore and share together this journey of hope and faith. I despair, when I see forms of Christian so-called spirituality that foster this culture of conformity in the name of holiness or discipleship, where God is presented as a sort of scary authority figure who punishes the disobedient, where phrases like only believe, trust and obey, and lean not on your own understanding become mantras for cultivating a mentality of learned helplessness, a psychology of compliance. So this is why I'm committed to cultivating what I'm calling black sheep spirituality. What is that? Well, I define it as an approach to faith, and I can put it up here on the screen for you. Black sheep spirituality is an approach to faith that can embrace a particular tradition, in my case Christianity, without assuming that it has an exclusive claim to truth. Nothing wrong. In fact, it's absolutely essential that we find where we fit, that we find a tradition that we can be part of, a story that we can learn from and contribute to. But I think it's essential that we can do that without assuming that this and this alone is the truth now. It's an approach to faith that sits comfortably with doubts and questions as an essential part of faith, not something to be tolerated or patronizingly accepted, but where questions and doubts are assumed to be an essential part of the faith journey. A faith that recognizes dissent and difference of opinion as something to cultivate, as a sign of a secure community. Black sheep spirituality is an approach to faith that affirms the necessity of constantly renewing, reinterpreting, and reforming beliefs in the light of new insights, new challenges, new situations. Revelation must never be something that is deep frozen, that's frozen in the past. I think divine revelation is, again, that kind of gurgling, bubbling reality that we can find all over the place in our world. And we'll look at that a bit more next week. Black sheep spirituality is an approach to faith that embraces divine revelation wherever it may be found, in art and science, in the natural world, as well as in religious traditions too, in the universal human experience of friendship, compassion, and justice. It's an approach to faith that treats faith as something to be lived and practiced, not embalmed in dogmatic beliefs and rituals. Black sheep spirituality, what I'm talking about, it's not something I invented. It's not a new thing. I've kind of given it a name and packaged it in a particular way. I've kind of branded it, if you like. But it's not a new thing. The church has always produced prodigals in the best sense, people who've swum against the tide, who've imagined outside the box, or who've disobeyed the rules in pursuit of a greater understanding. Sometimes these people have been left out or labelled heretic or suffered exclusion or a lot worse. Isn't it interesting that the term heresy originally referred to the act of choosing? That's its root meaning. It's to choose. To be a heretic simply means to choose for oneself. But over time, it came to denote a belief or an opinion that was deemed unacceptable, an idea or an interpretation that deviated from the recognised position of the church or the establishment. But surely it's a good thing, isn't it? It's a good thing for people to think for themselves. Isn't that, very much a part of what we value in the modern world? It's something that we should nurture and that we should foster, even if the rest of us disagree with the conclusions of the said people. Surely it's the sign of a strong group or society when it allows for dissent, when it actually stands for the right of a person to have an opinion different to ours. The Apostle James, in the New Testament, argues vigorously that faith isn't primarily about words, actually, but actions. And I often say, why is it so important what I believe about stuff that I can't even prove, that can't be proved? The virgin birth, the resurrection of Christ, all these things. Why is it so important that I say just the right words to affirm these things, which no one can prove anyway? Why not ask me instead how I treat my wife, or how I spend my money, or how I stand for justice and inclusion and reconciliation in the world? I mean, this is the real heresy, The real heresy is the evil that we do to one another and to the planet. Killing and abusing and persecuting minorities and people of difference, creating and sustaining systems of economic and social inequality, destroying the environment and our fellow creatures as well on earth. These are the genuine heresies, not views and beliefs that happen to depart from some prevailing religious consensus called orthodoxy. A lot of people think, and maybe I give the impression, that I'm against creeds. And I understand that, but actually, I'm all for creeds. So much so, I think we should all write one. Well, lots of them, actually. The thing to remember is that creeds were never just academic essays written for the sake of it. They were really answers to questions. They always were answers to questions, stuff that puzzled people at the time. Like, how can Jesus be divine and human at the same time? Or what do we believe about God and what God is like? Early Christians argued about these things. They argued about all kinds of things. And some of the arguments were really heated. So they had councils, gatherings of the good and the great in the church to argue the issues through and to try to come up with some conclusions. Now, that might be a slight caricature, but it's not very far off the mark of what that process was all about. Creeds are answers to questions that were important at the time. And that's fine, so long as you don't then banish and denounce everyone who disagrees, which they did. Or so long as creeds don't become so dogmatic that they can't be altered when the questions change, which they have changed, right? Because questions are linked inevitably to a time and place. So the questions that were asked in the 4th century are not at all necessarily the questions that we're asking in the 21st century. But beneath all of that, I think it's important, to write your own creedette, a bit like a shedette. It's important to write your own creedette, your own mini personal creed from time to time. And wouldn't Lent be a good time to do that? Might that not be a good little bit of homework that you could do during Lent? To try to identify what are the things that really, really matter to you about God, or about faith, or community, or the planet, or Black Lives Matter, or whatever. Don't bother with what you think you're supposed to believe. Put all that on one side. Dig a little deeper. What do you really believe? And that is really how I went about writing Black Sheep and Prodigals. Instead of feeling that I had to parrot fashion say what everybody told me was the truth, I just asked myself, but what do I believe? What can I believe? What do I feel passionate about? But remember, the things that matter most of all, are not abstract propositions, whether they're ancient ones or present day ones. What really matters is stuff that's to do with life, with being truly and fully human. As I said before, I'm a lot more interested in orthopraxis, which means correct behavior, than I am with orthodoxy, which means correct belief. Orthopraxis to me trumps orthodoxy every single time. Okay, so we'll carry on with this little journey next week, but why not start to give some thought to that this week? What sort of things, and you may just write down one every week or something, but write down something that you feel passionately about, that you would say, I'm writing the credo of Dave, of Pat, of Jim, of Nora, of whoever, and just try to put some things down on that. Okay? Right, well, we're going to toast the world, and you can still toast the world in Lent, You might want to do it with non-alcoholic drink. I said in my talk, The Shedlet for Ash Wednesday, that I feel very disinclined to give stuff up this Lent time, because you know what? It feels like the whole of the last year has been one long year-long Lent. And I'm ready to take some things up now rather than give them up. But if in the cause of being kind to yourself, being kind to your body, you've given up alcohol or chocolate or whatever, good on you. I think that's great. Me, I'm kind of looking in some other directions. But so whether you've got alcohol or non-alcohol, it doesn't matter. We're going to toast the world with something in a few moments' time. But first, let's come to some prayers. So we thank you, loving God, that Jesus calls people of goodwill in every age and place to break down the barriers that separate people, to embrace each other with humility and respect, to share kindness with every person, to struggle to bring justice to life in every place, and to welcome all to the feast of life. And we thank you that we can sit at your table, no matter who we are or who we have been, no matter what our confusions or how deep our doubts. We thank you, O God, that Jesus Christ lived in ways which reveal you to be a God who calls us on to a life which is greater and grander than we have ever known. Amen. So yeah, grab your drink. I'm going to try a bit of this devil juice here. Smells good. So my lovely friends, wherever you are, I invite you to join me in toasting the glorious gift of life. We may be in the midst still of a pandemic. It may be Lent. There may still be some pretty chilly winds for us round here anyway, that we've got to get through before spring fully springs out. But life is glorious. So let's toast it in all its beauty and diversity. Let's toast the coming of better things, the promise of warm sunshine, literally and metaphorically. Let's toast a future of hope, a future of love and justice and health for ourselves, for our neighbours, for people around the world, and also for this wonderful planet that sustains our life constantly. Please raise your glass and say after me, to life, l'chaim. So I'm going to finish by sharing with you one of my subversive saints. And here she is. So this is Chung Hyun Kyung. The artist, incidentally, is someone called Ellen Acton, Chung Hyun Kyung was a lay theologian of the Presbyterian Church of Korea. She was also associate professor of ecumenical theology at Union Theological Seminary in the United States. I could say her name better if I hadn't just been drinking whiskey, I think. At the 1991 World Council of Churches Assembly in Canberra, she caused quite a stir by referring to the goddess of compassion and wisdom, who in the West we call Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion and wisdom. She referred to this goddess as a culturally relevant way to interpret the Holy Spirit in Asia. She received a standing ovation, but appalled conservatives who labelled her a syncretist, someone who combines Christian teachings with elements of other traditions. Her response is exactly what I would say. Her response, I say, you are right, I am a syncretist, but so are you. She pointed out that all Christian theology contains elements of the culture from which it comes, but the dominant Western culture does not recognise this, kind of like not seeing the forest for the trees. And in this little icon that's been put there, well, you can see the goddess down there included in the image, and also a copy of her book, which is called Struggle to be the Sun Again. And it's a strong statement about the need for women to be treated by society, including, of course, and maybe particularly religious society, with equality. So I'm toasting you today. And, well, there it is, really. If you like what I'm doing, you're welcome to support me and Pat through the coffee site. Thank you so much to all you lovely ones who have done so. Those of you who do so every month is just so precious to us, and we don't take any of it for granted. So thank you. And what is happening this week? Well, I'm doing a soul space on Thursday, along with the Oasis Church Social Group in Croydon, who I've been working with for a couple of years now to put on soul spaces, first of all in a pub in Croydon, but now online. And so if you're interested in what I said in my Shedlet on Ash Wednesday and some of the things I've said today, Soul Space this week is on Time to Flourish, Lent Take 2. So it's kind of coming at the whole subject of Lent, but from a slightly different perspective. You can join in the Zoom presentation there. There will be a link put up on the Facebook page for you to find us, and you'll be very welcome to join us. So there you go, guys. Thanks for being with me this evening, and go well. Remember to be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, stay human. And I'm going to finish with a blessing and then a song, which I will tell you about in just a moment. Join me in saying this. The blessing of God, the eternal goodwill of God, the shalom and salam of God, the wildness and warmth of God, be among us and between us now and always. Amen. So, I'm a big fan of Michael Franti, a rapper from San Francisco, and I've played some of his music. Oh, well, I do quite frequently on Soul Space. I will be again this week. But this is a lovely, lovely song by him called Love Will Find a Way, and he's joined by a little 9-year-old girl called Jocelyn, who's basically singing the song for him, really, and I think it is just wonderful. So enjoy, have a good week, and I'll see you for a Shedlet in the middle of the week, and then next Sunday. Bye.
All right, we're here with Jocelyn. Tell me about you. Where are you from?
I'm from Boulder, Colorado, and I really love ukulele, and I also play the piano and the harp.
What do you do for a living?
Instruments.
Do you go to school?
No, I'm homeschooled.
Oh, well, that's still school. Yeah?
Well, not when you do 2 pages of math and a page or 2 of spelling and 20 minutes of ukulele, piano, and harp.
Okay, well that's good school. I wish I could go to your school. Can I come someday?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, what are you gonna play for us today?
I'm gonna play Love Will Find a Way.
Can I join you?
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. This song for all kinds of people, all of the cities and all of the street show, the synagogue and the mosque and the steeple, the bad, the ugly, the good and the evil. Some shoot bullets, some shoot needles. Some are trying to get by with eagles, getting trapped behind the concrete walls. Some are trying just to get equal. Could you ever give more today? Could you give a little to help love find a way? When you're feeling like you can't go on, love will find a way. And through the clouds and smoking guns and bombs, love will find a way. And when the whole world falls on their knees to pray, that love will win today. Just keep holding on, 'cause love will find a way. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Nobody's born hating another person. A mad world. Stop poisoning us so we can learn to hate another person, so we can learn to love a brother and sister, another mother or mister. The power of the system, the universal nation, communication, in every nation, worldwide. Could you ever give more today? Could you give a little to help love find a way? When you're feeling like you can't go on, love will find a way. And through the clouds and smoking guns and bombs, love will find a way. And when the whole world falls on their knees to pray, that love will win today. Just keep holding on, 'cause love will find a way. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Till I'm gone away. This is what I say. This is what I say. Peace, y'all. Peace, y'all. Peace, y'all. Peace, y'all.
That was awesome, Jocelyn. High five. Let's do it.